Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the SpotOn Spotlight, where we have candid conversations with leaders in business. I'm very excited about today's conversation because this is a person that's been a long time kind of friend and mentor in my life. He lives in the insurance space, but he really talks about risk. So I want to introduce you to Jonathan Theders. There he is. All right, Jonathan, welcome to SpotOn
Yes.
Spotlight. There he is.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So, Jonathan, tell me a little bit about your business has changed a little bit recently, and you're now part of OneDigital. Tell me about OneDigital and your role as a principal and market leader for kind of the Ohio South region.
Absolutely. So, yeah, Jonathan Theders. I've been a part of a family insurance business for the last 28 years. Clark Theders Insurance Agency, then to Risk Source Clark Theders, and now merged with the amazing team at OneDigital. We are one of the nation's largest and fastest growing insurance operations. We're also in human resource consulting and financial services, including 401k management. So it's been kind of amazing to go from a really cool, intimate group of 24 individuals in Cincinnati to a team of over 5,000 across the country and 200 offices. So it's been fun to be a part of that. Really excited about the future. My role as a principal and market leader for kind of the Southern Ohio market is really just to guide our local team, build relationships with our clients, and make sure that we're delivering on, you know, good tech-enabled, human-impacted solutions. So yeah, it's been really great to see the business evolve and grow, and from a business family from a family business to a business family, which is kind of fun.
That's very cool. So, talk to me about OneDigital. They're known for, like you mentioned, kind of that holistic approach, a lot of different offerings. How does risk management fit into that bigger picture of people and strategy and growth?
Well, one of my core beliefs is that insurance alone is never enough. Matter of fact, I trademarked that. That's actually a trademark that we hold, because unfortunately, I've seen some really bad things happen to some great people through my career. It's we're in the business of fixing things, rebuilding things, making people as whole as possible, and one thing what I've learned through that whole career is those that proactively manage the risks, those that prepare for things to be happen, for them to happen, always end up better when things do. And so, very early on in my career, I realized that you could buy insurance anywhere. There's 1,000 of us probably here in Cincinnati alone, on every street corner. So insurance is a very important part, but it's really the proactive risk management makes the difference, because when you think of a small business or even a mid-sized business, they don't have the luxury of like a Procter and Gamble or a Kroger that has a
Oh,
chief
yeah.
risk officer. The whole, all day, every day, all they do is think about risk. It's one hat amongst 1,000 that somebody wears. And so how do we leverage up and be that outsourced risk management partner to help our clients think of something that they don't have the time or energy to think about.
I've always really appreciated about what you guys do with that because insurance is a very reactive thing. It's managing for if this happens, where what you do is that approach to risk where it's proactive. It's where can we reduce exposure so you don't need the insurance, and it keeps employees safer and happier, and it keeps your equipment in better condition. So I think that's a really unique approach. Speaking of kind of small businesses and mid-sized businesses, what are some of those most overlooked risks that those types of businesses are facing today that they don't plan for or even have awareness about?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's quite a few. I mean, you can, from cyber threats to regulatory compliance to supply chain disruptions to workforce well-being. I mean, you can go down a lot of paths towards things. When I think of, just the last few years, supply chain, we realize how critical some certain components to what we do, whether that's a service provider in the supply chain or it's a raw good that goes into something that we're making. We That just-in-time inventory that we learned about in school that was so important causes big problems when the supply chain breaks or the vendor isn't there to solve your problem. And then there's things that you need to take time. So like just take for example like mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Mental health. in the workplace is a risk issue that a lot of people aren't talking about. They deeply underestimate the impact it has on productivity. When you think of remote work, our world has changed in the last 5 years. And it's easy to say, I'm based in Ohio and I've got this remarkable person I can hire in South Carolina because they're like the perfect person. I'm going to go hire them there. And then you realize, oh, shoot, there's compliance is a lot more complex than just hiring somebody in another state. I got to now adapt to South Carolina law and I got to do this. And then if you jump into New York or California or Florida, some tougher states, it can be that. So that's really where we feel like OneDigital, we fit in, is just to say, how do we kind of get that fresh strategic perspective to help people think ahead of the risks that they might not see coming, but start asking the questions.
That's so important. And that's, I think, that awareness piece is like sometimes small businesses are so busy working on the business and in the business that they don't have that big picture view. They're like, I got this right now. I need a new employee. I'm going to hire him. I forgot about all the other things that, go along with that. So you guys do a really good job of that big picture view and helping kind of find those blind spots.
Absolutely.
So do you have an example of how being proactive in risk management has helped a client really avoid a major setback? I mean, we don't need names, but just like a situation where like a client in manufacturing or...
Yeah, of course. I could think of one was a mid-sized manufacturer. They were growing. They got a lot of, really exciting things going on. But cyber was a big issue for them.
Oh, yeah.
And the challenges of downtime and the threats of those things could be really, really impactful. So we did a full risk assessment for them. We did put cyber liability insurance in place. So that's, that is good. We rolled out employee training. We realized that their systems were pretty vulnerable because they had, they needed some segmentation of their systems because it was all lumped into one area. So if you gained access to one spot, you could essentially have access to the whole company. So we worked with their managed service provider, because we're not obviously on the technical side, but how to break apart some of their infrastructure to insulate the business. And then they had an attack. They did have something happen, and it was the training, it was the proactive nature, it was the insurance, it was everything that helped that be a non-effect. It was really less impactful. And I think that's one of the challenges that risk management has, because you put in a lot of effort. This was probably 5 years earlier that we did the work, and the benefit of that work comes when you get the actual, the
when you least expect it.
You least expect it, and then you don't really reflect back at how important that work was 5 years ago. So risk management is kind of an ungrateful sometimes thing, because when it works, you actually prevented the stuff that was going to be bad. And so
you're the hero then, because you planned ahead.
Sometimes don't even know, because you're like, hey, the training stopped. How many times did the fish get stopped with proper training, that you don't realize how detrimental that could be. So yeah, it's just thinking differently and getting, partners involved early, I think, is really critical.
I'll say you guys did a really good job with helping us with that. I mean, disclaimer, you do our insurance and risk management. And one of the things was cybersecurity was not on a small business radar, but, working through that process and making sure we have good coverage. Because I know a local township that just got hit from a cyber incident, and a family member's business. And when it happens, it can be devastating. So having that foresight, and even us as a small business, like you said, the phishing, we get emails from, we had a brand new employee, and I don't know how people are so good at this, but they're like, hey, I'm in a meeting, don't come find me, but I need you to run out to the store right now and get like $500 in gift cards. And luckily she was smart enough to say, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't sound like something I need to do. So I'm going to check on that. All the way down to like checking links. I can't tell you in the past 4 weeks how many, hey, here's a quick link from Microsoft OneDrive. I need you to check this document, prove it. I was like, I haven't talked to you in like 3 months, and this comes out of the blue. I'm just going to send you a quick email or call and make sure this is legit before I click on links. So having that awareness of risk management is so important. So how should business leaders... go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the things I just heard the other day was, my first time, was people are mailing packages to people's homes they're good. So just think of a package that shows up.
Yeah.
And then you open it up, and it's got no identifying. You're like, I didn't order this, I didn't do this, but it has a QR code that says, you know, scan here. So then you're like, who sent this to me? Who was this? Where did this come from? So you scan it, and then you start putting your personal information in,
Oh
and
no.
it's snagging and stealing you. So it's almost like theft through a gift. And I'm like, the world is nuts, you
It's
know?
Trojan horse. Here's a gift. Just don't look
So,
inside.
and I think what sometimes people get embarrassed by how they got hooked in some of this stuff, but we have to
So
talk about it
easy.
because, these are our family members, they're our friends, they're our neighbors, just hearing these type of stories allows you to think twice. So if somebody sends me something, I'm not clicking a QR code that's in a box. I'm just gonna either donate it if I don't want it or use it if I got it.
Thanks for
Like
the gift. So
so.
that leads to another great point. So how should business leaders think about risk in terms of strategy and not just insurance? How can business leaders prepare for that and be strategic about it?
Yeah. Well, I think a part of it is it has to be cultural. I mean, you have to be part of it. And, there's a lot of good, strategy work around, psychological safe environment. Do people feel comfortable bringing ideas? Do people feel comfortable about making constructive challenges
Yeah.
around the way things should be? And I think that if you weave the risk management into the overall strategy of the business and you open up the workforce to be able to share. The good news about risk management, and I've been doing this for 28 years. Most solutions reside with the people that are already there. Like we don't have to get these crazy, you know, it's it's about asking the right questions and providing the right environment where the people that know how to do the work are willing and able to share the solution. Uh, Most times it's right there in their home. So I think culture is like a really, really important piece of this,
Mm-hmm.
and ensure that the leadership feels that expresses it's important, and then opens up the doors, like literally the physical doors, and that to break down some walls to say, I want to hear. And I've seen all kinds of different people, that are accepted to that, and some people that are very resistant, and sometimes people don't realize that they might want an open environment, but they don't listen to what anybody has to say, and so that people are just not going to bring
There's a
ideas.
disconnect there.
Disconnect, and so one of the things at OneDigital that we say is like best work, best life. 99% of the time, we should enjoy the work that we're doing, and the only reason why it's not 100 is because it's work, and so there's always an element of it that stinks anyway, just because it's work.
Yeah.
um, how do we create the right environment where people find their best work and their best life here.
That's awesome. I think you mentioned culture too. I think that's an important piece because that can seem like such a heavy lift when you're like, oh, we need to start integrating this into culture. We're already trying to figure out culture as it is. So adding another layer on there, I think, can be really intimidating for people to try and figure out how to do that the right way.
Yeah, I remember one time I was down in Atlanta, at Savannah, Georgia. Actually, I was doing some training on culture with a group, and it was another business, and we talked about values and how important it is to align your values, and make your decisions based on it. And he was really struggling with turnover. He had a lot of
Mm-hmm.
heavy turnover, and I said, well, what do you value? Like, what are your values? And he cited off some things. And I said, no, no, not the words you put on the thing, but like, what do you truly value? And he said, I value intensity. Whoa,
That's a big
I was
word.
like, wow, that was a big word. And he said, we're an intense organization. I'm an intense person. And I was like, but you don't have intensity as one of your values. Like, I am telling you, it's your turnover problem. Can be very successful in your business, maybe. I don't know. I could not be successful in your business because I'm not naturally an intense person.
Yeah.
Like, and if you hire people that are intense, they'll thrive in that world. I mean, I wouldn't want to
Until they
work for
butt
them.
heads, until they're all intense together.
But I said, that's your problem is you value intensity and you're scared to say it. And you actually should just say it because
Yeah.
you got a better hope because people will find it day
It can be
two.
a filter. I mean, that's the thing. It can be magnetizing to the right people, and it can help filter out the wrong people. And we talk about that. We do a lot of HR video content. It's like we help you attract, hire, and retain top people. The best thing you can do by putting those values out there is show people like this is not the right fit for me. Then you don't have to hire them and
100.
have turnover. I mean, then you reduce that turnover cost.
Absolutely.
So we
Absolutely.
we touched on this technology piece and how it's changing, but how do you see technology, data, and now this like crazy world of AI changing the way that businesses have to assess and manage risk within the business?
Yeah, I think obviously technology is changing everything, and generative AI in particular, and the futures of that are changing it as well. There's certainly some positives. There's certainly some negatives. There's positives for society. There's negatives for society. And I think one thing I hope that the world gets a little bit better of, or a little bit more important, would be around kind of the ethics of it, how to actually use AI. But from the negative and the challenging side, when we talked about cyber threats, it used to be, send your money to the Prince of Nigeria, and I think we've all kind of figured out that's
Maybe
not
not
a
a good idea.
legitimate. You know, but now it's voice changing, and it's things are written in the language that mom or dad would say something, or your coworker. It's gotten really, really, really good, and so we have to adapt to that. I think the other part too is how do we utilize it for good? So, like at OneDigital, one of the things we've got over 20 full-time AI coworkers.
Oh wow,
Actually, one of that work on our behalf. We've invested a ton of money in artificial intelligence, and it's all been about not replacing the work that the employees at OneDigital, but how it enhances the employee of OneDigital. So they all have personas, they all have names. They actually have a real life human manager that manages their work, that
that's cool.
reviews, that gives it training and education, and they have little personalities, which is kind of fun. Quinn is my new best friend on the property casualty side because she is awesome. But you know, with that, I think that is only going to speed up. And the fears that I have is that it's not used to make people smarter, but it actually takes unintelligent people, and people perceive that they're smart. And that I think is the dangerous part, because it could be wrong. It's
Yeah,
it's not it's not all accurate. And so, if you're using a way I've been using it and really pushing is to be an educator, to help lead you to the path, to help be a better version of yourself. But you have to know and understand it. You can't just like plug in a prompt and tell somebody it's it, because it could be wrong. So that's
that's a
uh,
huge lookout too, because it hallucinates. And any AI course you ever go to or speaker will say, "Hey, check your work," because there's the case of the attorney put a legal brief together and it built this whole case on case law that doesn't even exist. So
absolutely.
that can be a huge liability.
But I do think that there's like some really great things. So, like for instance, based on the size of OneDigital, and kind of the support services that we provide to some of the larger national and international insurance brokers, um, we have a ton of health data, like a lot of health data at OneDigital, and so using AI and tools to harness, and using predictive analytics so that small and mid-sized businesses can now start to predict healthcare trends and how it
That's
impacts
cool.
not just the industry, but how it affects spot on productions. Like, how does this actually relate to the client? And if I pull this lever today, it might financially help me, but it might hurt me 5 years from now. Or if I pull this one, it might be something that the my employee values the most. So how do you take
Interesting.
employee sentiment, mix these things? And so I really feel like there's some really good things of being able to harness data and into digestible, predictive ways for the future.
Yeah.
Um, but you got to know what you're doing. It's I remember, and I can't remember his name, but he was the head of data for 8451, and talked to me many years ago. And one of the things I always thought was so interesting is he said, if we had at Kroger, if we had top 10 butters and we needed to eliminate three SKUs, typically the idea would be get rid of the bottom three SKUs. They're the lowest sellers of, you know,
Yeah.
and but using the data and purchasing and what people do, you realize that the eighth sold butter is actually the kosher butter, that people of the Jewish faith are going to buy, and so you actually might want to get rid of the number two seller, because that person will go to one or three. But if you get rid of the
Interesting.
lower seller, they might not come there to shop,
Yeah, you might
because they don't.
exclude somebody, and they're like, "Well, I can't get this anymore, so I'm out."
Yeah, and so it always sat with me, like, how we can use technology, and sometimes technology and AI leads us to the easy answer, but the easy answer isn't always the right one. It's how do we uncover the truth, and how do we use that to leverage the right solution for that particular client or person, to make the best decision for the future.
It's an interesting point too, because there's a saying like I can make data tell whatever story I want it to, so you have to be very intentional about making sure you're truly understanding the big picture of the data, and like you said, not just surface level rankings 1 through 10.
Absolutely.
One of the other crazy things I've seen about AI recently and how it can lead to risk exposure is, you mentioned voice changing, but there's now filters, and Snapchat kind of started pioneering this with like face swap. But I could be on this call right now with you, and there's software that I could plug in that could make me look like 100 other people, and you and I could look like you could look like I'm having a conversation with you, but I could be, you know, the governor of Ohio or whoever else you want it to be, and I can respond to you in real time and have the knowledge of our history together, but look like a completely different person. Which, do you think you need to put policies in place to avoid risk for safe words, or how do you do, like, we have two-factor authentication for logins? How do you do that in real life and with this risk exposure for AI?
Yeah, Ian, I had never really thought about it, in that way at work, as far as two-factor safe word. So I appreciate that because it's actually a really great thing. We've done that at forever for, like, in our own families where,
Yeah.
we're gonna have a meeting spot, or, my daughter, if she was ever in a situation, she would say, "Hey, did you feed the dogs?" You
Yep.
know, and that was my because she would never ask that. And that was a clue for,
Hey,
my
something's not
wife.
right.
Something's not right, and then we say, "Hey, and we need you to come home." "Oh, really? My parents are terrible. They're horrible humans. They won't let me stay out." Thank you. So yeah, I agree. I think that there probably should be, a way to make sure that that it's legit. So
Yeah, they are who they say they are.
yeah, and one thing we have seen, and it is something that I think is, an important part, is when business transition key leaders. We had this situation at a school system where they had a new superintendent, and people get to know if you work with somebody like your father and your
Hmm.
mom, the way they write emails, the way
Oh
they
yeah.
talk, it's it's familiar, and so if something isn't like the way your father would say something, you kind of go, "That's not him."
Hmm.
But when you have a new employee or a new leader, you don't know how they talk. And so it's actually kind of the more vulnerable time, when there's a transition and for some of that spoofing and some of that thing, because I could pretend. And so this particular situation, somebody had hijacked the new, superintendent's identity, basically email, and was communicating. And the people under, like, that reported didn't know how he
Oh man.
spoke. He
Yeah.
didn't know that he doesn't sign things best regards. Like, there's like little things that you're like,
BFF.
yeah, BFF, like, yeah. So I think, when there is big transitions, I think those are also, you don't have to like freak yourself out, but as a leader to say, hey, let's be aware, like, I'd rather you ask two questions twice,
Yeah.
than to, make the wrong assumption. You
Interesting.
know?
That's crazy. So we've talked about AI. What other maybe emerging risks should leaders be paying attention to that are coming down the pipe in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think, anything with regard to, on the human aspect side, I think people are everything, these days. So, what is our risk to our human capital? I think truly, from a cyber perspective, I think that's always going to be a big piece. I think we need to be asking a lot of good questions. When I look, you know, CFOs love to put like things in, certain buckets, and they like to live on their budgets, and all those things are very, very, very important. I really push leaders to say you've got to have a budget item for these type of things. You've got to have a risk management bucket, have a cyber bucket, invest. If you can't get there in day one, just increase your bucket on the IT side to get you to where you need to be, because I have seen too many times when bad things happen, then they end up spending 4 times as much to fix the problem than if they had just did it over time and avoided all the stress. So the other part I think is a big component is do like a risk assessment, pull your leadership team together. You don't have to overthink it, but what are the things that could happen to my business? What are those impactful things, and what can we do about it? Are they, and remember one of our clients, they did a strategic planning session. It was kind of cool. It was called War, and they broke their team up into 4 groups, and they said our goal for the entire day is to build a strategy that puts us out of business. So it was kind of a reverse strategy, because it
Interesting.
was like you put your eyes as a competitor, as somebody who wants us out of the bit, and we're going to destroy. And he said the negative is we got back in an hour, and every group had put us out of business. So like they thought it was going to be an all day affair, and it was a little too easy. And
Dang.
so, but what was great about that, he said, was so great about it is now we talked about the solutions. How do we create a barrier to that? How do we invest to do this? So I think you can make things a lot of fun. And so I always push people every quarterly meeting. If you could do monthly, but certainly quarterly, put risk management as a topic of conversation. What should we be thinking about as an organization today? And you can if you break out the traditional buckets of physical hazards that can happen, and financial and operational, and human capital, and at least get your mind spinning. Is there a key employee that if that person left today would disrupt this entire business? Or is it, you love people, so it's not like
Yeah.
you can mourn people, and then there's people that can actually bring your business down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and so, who are those critical people? And then how do we either bring in redundancy, education, training, not to eliminate them, but to protect the business, and so it can be fun just kind of going through those different aspects of things.
I love that war idea. Like, how would somebody put us out of business so then you can strategize against those exposures? That's a very
Yeah.
unique approach.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea. It's the same way that, when you have a business owner sometimes that won't transition and won't give up things. And you've got this really talented team, and it's this probably legacy owner that's just not there. And a colleague of ours, old board member of mine, one of the things he used to say is, "You're dead. Now what?" And so he would pull everybody together, and he would look at the business owner, and he would say, "You're dead. Now what?" And then people would start saying what was going to happen. And then the person would come back, and they go, "No, no, no, that's not the way I want it." And like, "No, you're dead."
You're dead. You're out.
And he forced this person to sit and listen to how his company was going to be managed. And then it's like, wait a second, I got to do this now. I
Yeah.
got to take the time, because it's important. I mean, you almost feel like it's a protection, but the reality is, it's almost hurting as much as it's protecting by being that. And that was one of the reasons why, joining OneDigital was important to me. I'd been the sole shareholder. I needed to bring on some partners at some point, but it was like, how do you make this happen? And I tell people, when I bought the last parts of my shares, I was like, it was I loved it for like 4 days, and then I thought, if something happens to me, if I get hit by the proverbial or literal bus, this is not good for my family. It's not
Yeah.
good for obviously me, but it's not good for my team, because so we build a business that's secure, that gives these amazing people that I work with every day, that I'm so blessed to have as a team, give them the platform and the security that they can continue on tomorrow if any one of us were to ever be disrupted. And again, I hope to continue, growing and being a part of everything forever, but you don't know what life throws at you. And you got to be prepared. You got to be vulnerable and real to that. because it will happen at some point.
That sounds like a new seminar for the Gearing Center to put on. Like they've got NGI, but the precursor, like you're dead. Now what?
You're dead, now what? That would be
I
kind of
like
a
that.
fun one.
That would be a
Yeah.
fun one. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. I think one of the other things you and I were talking about earlier, this is just a brief note, is just the cost of things is a risk to businesses. And especially in your world with insurance, we talked about a car accident isn't a $2,000 repair anymore on a front bumper. It's a $7,000 to $8,000. And with building costs going up, like if something happens to your business, are you covered from an insurance perspective, or are you playing ahead budget wise to make sure you're covering the new cost of things? So that's something.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Insurance doesn't really, they don't directly care how much things cost to make. They do care about how much it costs to repair.
Yeah.
So, and it can be brutal, and contractors, they're tougher to find. And so, even just when you're trying to get something done, it's like, oh yeah, we'll see you in 3 weeks. It's like, no, I don't have 3 weeks, and so just, things take longer and they're more expensive. It's just fact.
So how can a leader listening today who wants to be more proactive, what's one step that they could take over the next week to month to better protect their company?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing I would start with is a risk assessment. Whether that's partnering, you certainly can partner with other firms. You can partner with your insurance professional that should have, knowledge. Certainly, I'm willing to help in any way that I possibly can. But you can do it yourself too. I mean, just I think spending time with the leadership team, going through what are those risks that directly can affect and impact our business. When I think of your business, Ian, what would a bad auto accident cost or impact you when you're on a photo shoot run?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden you lose your critical van, you lose a lot of your equipment. Maybe I hope we're not going to pretend anybody's hurt. So nobody got hurt.
Nobody got hurt.
But get hurt.
We lost the moneymaker. We lost the production van and all the gear that goes with it. Like, what next?
And what happens? So how are we prepared? Do we have a friendly competitor that we can, make an arrangement that, hey, I can borrow some of your stuff if I need to in the interim, and you could borrow mine if you got into a pinch? Do we, have some? What's the backup? What's the solution?
Yeah.
And even if you don't have a actual solution, talking about it will make you better prepared if it happened. So, like, just even get your mind psychologically prepared that this is what we're going to do is important. So I would really focus on that. Look at your policies, identify any gaps, identify your key risk employees and where things are. And so yeah, I would start with a risk assessment.
That is really good advice. And having been at this a while, I think there's like even the van thing. We haven't really had that conversation. Like, oh, what happens if this isn't around tomorrow for us to use? That's a big uh-oh.
Yeah, exactly. And when somebody says, hey, do you mind if I borrow the van for this? No.
Yeah. All right, so as we're coming to the end of our time, kind of just shifting gears here real quick. What's your favorite business advice? Either something you've received or one that you like to give?
Oh gosh, there's been so many in my career. I think some of the more impactful, one of the things my dad said to me very early on is do the right thing regardless of profit. Like there's no place in good business to do the wrong thing. Take care of the customer will take care of you. And if you do the right thing, you always win in the end. And then I think the other part too, which I think is so very important, is, I've always been a believer that you kind of empower your people and they'll empower your business. Early on, we would get a little frustrated in business. Could be like, why didn't John or Jane Doe take the ball and run with that? Like everything kind of falls back on, at the time it was Rick and Jonathan to make decisions. And then you realize, one, we weren't empowering people to make those decisions. We weren't giving them the right tools, education, training to be empowered to feel comfortable to make the decision, or to get the right resource to feel comfortable with the decision. And so really what I think more than anything is how do we empower our people through tools, technologies, and teamwork to feel comfortable to empower our business to continue to thrive and grow. So yeah, give the reins, and ask the questions. Do you have everything it takes for you to do your job well? Is there a resource that I can help, or a training and education that I can provide? And when people say no, then they've got what they need. It's in their hands at that point.
Yeah.
When they say, actually, if I could have this, or I really need a training here, um, then as a leader, that's our job, is to help provide those things. So.
In your business, how are you doing that? Is that part of an annual conversation or a quarterly conversation? How often are you touching base with people to make sure they have the tools they need?
Yeah, so we touch base every 2 months. So we do what we call a talent development check-in. Um, and so it's a TD check-in is what we call them here, but nobody know what TD was. They think touchdown, but talent development check-in. And it's a couple questions ahead of time, and people write them out. Through our technology, they actually answer the questions, and then you have a dialogue. It's not long. I can't say that some don't go a half hour, but most are 10 minutes, but it's just a touch base. Do you have what you need,
Nice.
and is there anything that you need to be doing, or is there something you want to grow into, because in a growing company, especially in a small business, and I still consider, even though we're part of a large company, we're still a small business. We're 40 people, here in Cincinnati, is being the solution for what their future is. So if you can help understand that, hey, I'd really like to learn about this, they could be navigating to a new role that you need tomorrow. And so, I think those talent development check-ins and we separate like the performance review. Like, we haven't done performance reviews in 10 years
Yeah.
because nobody likes to wait a year to be told whether they're doing a good job or not. And frankly, you focus on the two things that, were critical, or you're trying to improve upon, and it gets, well, why didn't you tell me about this?
Yeah, you let it go too long. The issue goes too long.
Like, short stints of human connection, I think, are really important. So.
That's excellent. John, I always learn something new and have a great conversation with you. Where can people find you online? How can they connect with you?
Yeah, so obviously I'm still at risksource.com as far as our local website, and of course the OneDigital website as well, but also through LinkedIn, at Theders, and then of course my email address or cell phone. I'm pretty much online anytime, all the time. So I'm a big believer in give to get. It's like my whole philosophy in life is just to surround yourself with good people and be a giver. And then if it circles back in life sometime, it's great. If not, you've helped another person in the human race. And that's good enough for me. So,
man, that's another good piece of advice too.
Yeah,
I love it.
If we all took that all every day, it might be
a great world.
Yeah, we'd just be in barter system, which would be pretty good too.
That would be terrible.
Yeah.
Well, Jonathan, thank you for your time. I really appreciate our conversation, and a lot of really good nuggets of content in there. So thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Anytime, Ian. Thank you.
See ya.